Alright, we are facing the modern defense today. So against the modern, I kind of like to play it in a sort of Vienna setup with knight c3, bishop c4, and pawn to e4. I actually have a video from, I think like 3 days ago maybe, at the time this video will be released, where I play this exact system in an over-the-board classical game. That's a very interesting game. And hopefully I'll be able to show you why I like this system. So it basically encourages black to play c5 and transpose the game into kind of like an accelerated dragon Sicilian, which a lot of the time is not what your opponent wants if they're playing the modern defense, because if they wanted to play an accelerated dragon Sicilian, they would have just played c5 on move 1, right? And if they don't play c5, their position doesn't make all that much sense, because kind of one of the main ideas of the modern is to strike with c5 or e5. E5 doesn't really make sense, because then you block in the bishop, right? So here we can kind of get like a Grand Prix sort of position with like f4, knight f3, castle, something like that. You can also consider h4, h5 type ideas, also viable. But yeah, my opponent goes knight f6. We'll just go knight to f3. We can even consider pushing e5 very early on, potentially. Here, I don't think it quite makes sense, so we're just going to castle. And you can see that we've basically kept the tension in the center of the board. By not committing our pawns to the dark squares, black puts his pawns on the dark squares, and we have our pawns on the light squares, which means that there is a constant tension as to whether either of us will encroach on our opponent's color complex, if that makes sense. So, okay. My opponent goes e6, trying to play pawn to d5. That is one of the key ideas in these positions. And the way that you deal with this, or the way that I like to deal with this, is by dropping the bishop back to b3. Now, the reason that you play bishop b3 is because we can't really stop d5. We can't stop it, right? So we take the sting out of d5, so it doesn't come with tempo on our bishop, which means that we don't have to take or allow black to take here. On d5, we can push e5, counterattacking and keeping the center locked shut and locking this bishop out of the game. Which, by the way, is what happened in that over-the-board game that I am referencing. So, okay, knight to c6. My opponent could try and move like knight a5, chasing my bishop. So, in these sorts of lines, a4 is quite a nice move, which stops black from expanding on the queen side, and also knight a5 can be met with bishop to a2, tucking the bishop away. So pawn to b6, and here I think is the time to play knight to e2. Knight e2 may look like a strange move. The point, however, is to rotate the knight to g3 and play pawn c3, which I'm going to start with, which just means that we take a bit more control of the center, right? On d5, we're still going to play e5, most likely. But if black doesn't play pawn to d5, we have ideas of playing pawn to f5, particularly now the bishop has been ketoed and no longer watches the f5 square. And you can already see how, if f5 were to occur, we could rip open the diagonal for this bishop, our dark squared bishop enters the game, our rook can enter the game, our knight can hop into the position, this knight can hop into the position, our queen can hop into the position. We have a big attack brewing, even though it may not look like it. Even though it may look like we're like standing off of the center by playing moves like knight back to e2, this is actually an aggressive move. And c3 is a decent move to... It kind of can serve a couple of functions. One, just to stop this knight from hopping in at all. Two, to close off this diagonal forever for the dark squared bishop. And three, we can also rotate our bishop to c2 in lots of lines, because as I said, f5 is a big idea of this position. But, you know, if black were to go d5 and we would push e5 and kick the knight away, well, our bishop isn't doing anything on this diagonal anymore, right? So by playing c3, if d5, e5 occurs, we can drop the bishop back to c2 and bring it onto potentially a more favorable diagonal. So this is what I play against the modern. And I think it's very good at taking people out of their preparation, which the computer will often just completely throw insults at me because I'm not playing pawn to d4 in the opening, which is objectively the best move. And if you want to play that, you can play that, absolutely. I just prefer this because this is a kind of structure that I am familiar with and I'm comfortable with, and I understand the ideas of it. Like this knight to e2, pawn to c3 maneuver is a bit abstract. If you didn't know these structures, you may not even consider that. So my opponent goes queen d7, just developing the queen, maybe exerting more control over the f5 square. I think we can go knight to g3, trying to play f5. Because if f5 in take and take and take, theoretically I sacrifice a pawn. But I don't really care because I open up this diagonal and also the pawns get split up. So I'm happy to sack a pawn in that scenario. I mean, you could actually make the argument that in this position I could have played f5. That would have been reasonable, to be fair. But I figured we'll just prepare it a little bit. I'm not really sure how black stops f5. We could also consider knight h4. But I think the immediate f5 is perfectly fine. Bishop g5 is often strong, trying to apply a lot of pressure to this knight. And this is just really difficult for black to deal with. This is a really difficult attack for black to deal with. And hopefully, I'll be able to show you why. So take, take. If takes, black wins a pawn. But as I said, I'm more than happy to give away the pawn. I'll probably win it back anyway, because we just have way too much pressure. But I mean, realistically, if take and we play knight h4, we're going to be taking back. And this is going to be a problem. Our knight is going to be way too strong, and black is going to absolutely crumble. So, yeah, this is a very aggressive way to play. And by playing f5, we have successfully ripped open this diagonal for the bishop, which is another bonus. Now, black could try and shut the diagonal down with a move like d5. Sure, but the d5 pawn isn't supported by a pawn on e6 anymore. So that would not only shut down his own bishop, but also the pawn could still be weak. So knight e5, my opponent offers me a knight trade. Is that good? Knight takes, pawn takes. Bishop g5, threatening take and take, because we open up the rook. Take, bishop g5. Where does the knight go? If knight d5, pawn f6 kicks the bishop back. That's devastating. If take, I take with the knight, and that's devastating. I think we might already be close to winning. I mean, we still have a lot of the game left to play, but this is slow, well, relatively quickly looking like an untenable position for black. Because this pawn on f5 is just so strong. If this pawn was back on f2, I would maybe even argue that black is better because of our d3 pawn maybe being weak. But yeah, our pawn on f5 just completely undermines black's kingside because you just can't take. You cannot take because of knight f5. And you may have heard the phrase knife f5, as in like a knife that you cut with, because it is so cutting, basically, to get a knight into the f5 square, or the f4 square, vice versa. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. And I hope you guys are enjoying the climb beyond 2200 rapid, because I was doing, obviously, the Karo Khan versus Everything series and the King's Indian versus Everything series. But chess.com shut down my accounts. I don't know why. And I've been trying to get them back, but we will see. So, bishop d5. I'm not sure that works. So, I assume he wants take, but I'm not obliged because my bishop is defended. I mean, I might hang the d3 pawn, but that's just a pawn. I'm thinking, what happens if I take on g6? I guess he wants to take back with the f pawn because he'll be unpinning the f pawn so the rook defends the knight, which is interesting. That is interesting. If I take on d5, I don't think knight takes makes sense because of pawn to f6 and the bishop gets kicked back. And that looks pretty bad. So, if take and queen takes, takes, knight e4. King g7. I mean, take. That looks pretty bad. I take with discovered check. And then I'm at least winning a pawn. And the king is completely exposed. So take, queen takes. Bishop takes, bishop takes. Wait, was that the move? Yeah. Knight to e4. Bishop e7? Pawn f6 anyway. Bishop moves, and then I try to get to h6. I guess if queen d2, rook e8, queen h6, there's bishop f8. But then I can even try and play knight g5 and go for h7. I could also lift the rook. Okay, that's one option. Other option, I could take immediately. And after take, I can play knight to e4. But then he could take here. And after takes, I don't really want to be trading queens, I don't think. That doesn't make sense. I do have nice pressure on f7, but don't know. c4 doesn't really make sense, I don't think. I mean, bishop back to c6. I block off my bishop. If take and take, then take. He can still take with the f-pawn because my bishop can't see. So probably not. Bishop takes, bishop takes. Here. Bishop takes, knight e4. I think that's the way to go. If knight takes, I mean, f6 looks pretty devastating. Kicking the bishop back. I mean, I'm not really sure how black plans to survive that position. It is, I think, one of the better ways that black can try and defend this position, to be fair to my opponent, because my bishop on this long diagonal is really, really hard to deal with. I mean, I guess you could make the argument that maybe taking on g6 first was better. And after takes, bishop g5, this would no longer work. Or would it? I mean, take. Yeah, that wouldn't work. My bishop's defended. So maybe taking first. But I don't know. Okay, queen d5. I think we should take the knight. If take, then he takes back with the pawn, and I think he's fine there. So I think we should take the knight. Let's take. It is a big decision to give away my bishop. Do not get me wrong. That's a big decision. But, I mean, this just looks so tempting. Knight e4. And the problem for black, in my eyes, is that I have really good control over the light squares in the center. And he is a dark squared bishop, so he can't contest the light squares properly. I also just have a very clear plan of attack, like f6, queen can come to g4, rook can come to h3, I can double up on the f-file. It looks pretty good. Now, this bishop could go to d8 to try and get out of the way, and that might be a good approach, to be fair. I still just don't really see how black defends. I think just f6. And the problem is, my knight is on a light square. There's no pawns that can attack my knight. His bishop can't attack my knight. As long as I can defend d3, which I can with moves like rook to f3, then my knight guards f6. f6 suffocates the black position, and I can try and launch an attack. If the bishop comes to h4, I mean, queen g4 comes with tempo. That's no good. The bishop doesn't really have any safe squares, and I think my knight just dominates the bishop, which is counterintuitive because, I mean, normally bishops... Why? I don't know whether normally, but a lot of the time bishops are better than knights, but here I think my knight is better than the bishop. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. We are very close to 20,000 subscribers, which is nuts. So, okay. What else? I mean, we also have a cool idea where if the bishop moves to d8, let's say, we have this queen to f3 move, which threatens knight to f3 check, picking up the queen. So that's also interesting. It feels like a one-trick move, though. Like, I'm not sure it actually poses a threat other than a cheap tactic. The black king could just move, and then why did I bother putting the queen on f3 when the rook clearly wants to go to f3? So we don't want to play for cheap tricks. I think we have a clear positional advantage here, and we should try to massage that and work that into a winning advantage. Again, king g7 is an interesting idea. I just don't think it works. Again, knight takes, king takes, and then we take on g6 with discovered check. The king can take on g6, but after queen g4, king moves to h6, rook to f6 is checkmate. So black literally just gets checkmated. So king g7 isn't an option. Therefore, the bishop has to move. If the queen tries to defend the bishop with like queen to c6, let's say, maybe? I guess I didn't fully consider that, because if I take, you can take and open up the rook. If queen c6, I might have queen b3, though, pinning the pawn. Or maybe queen f3, actually. If queen c6, queen f3, threatening to take here, and then win the bishop. Even if f takes. Yeah, okay, so he goes bishop e7. And I mean, f6 just looks winning. I mean, queen f3, again, feels like a cheap trick. Doesn't really accomplish anything. I don't know, though. f6, bishop moves. If queen f3, rook d8. Here. Queen e3. Rook e8. So if queen h6 is bishop f8. I guess he kind of holds on there. I think just pushing f6 is clearly the way to go. The bishop sucks on d6 anyway. I think a big mistake would be c4 in this position. I think. Because, I don't know, maybe queen to d4 check is annoying. Taking this bishop looks ludicrous. I think queen d2 makes sense. Rook e8 or rook d8 is basically forced to drop the bishop back to stop me from going queen h6 and queen g7 mate. What else can I do here? I can lift the rook. So rook f3, for example. I think c4 is my only concern. Trying to distract my pawn. I guess worst case I can just take the bishop. Queen takes, then we take on c4. The endgame has to be better. I mean, we have a 4-on-2 on the queen side. And the pawn on f6 is very constrictive. If he has c4, rook h3... Wait, if he has c4, queen d2... If you take, then I just mate you. But that's not going to work. Queen d2, rook e8. Rook f3, rook e8. Rook h3. I guess h5 maybe. Perhaps that's short-sighted. Queen g4. You can't take because of this, but you do have this. King moves, then you could save the bishop. But then... Well, the queen does control h6, actually. I don't know, I guess rook d7 should be good. But I don't really see why I'm giving black anything. Let's think. I mean, h4, h5 is interesting, but I think it's the wrong way to look at the position because black doesn't have to take. And obviously h6 doesn't do anything. I mean, actually it just stops our own access. Maybe just queen d2 and rook d1 is easiest. Maybe. Maybe the queen would... I think the queen wants to go to h4, though. perhaps queen e1 is the way to go, because if this, then this, and the knight is defended and the bishop is lost. And there's no queen e3 check. Okay, I'm going to go queen e1. This looks correct to me. Because queen h4, I think, is where the queen wants to go. And the d3 pawn is untouchable because of rook to d1, and the bishop is lost. Point is the knight is defended, and e3 is defended. So the bishop is just completely lost. So, yeah, I guess queen h4, rook f3, rook h3 type ideas. If h5, we'll figure it out. Maybe even g4 works. Okay, so rook e8 as expected. Stopping, well, basically preparing the bishop coming back to f8, essentially. I guess rook d1. Just guarding the d3 pawn. I don't want to give that away. Rook f3 was also viable, but I think this is fine. I want to try and put a little bit of time pressure on. Black is doing a good job of defending the position, for sure, but I just don't know how long he can sustain it. I mean, if c4 I take and the bishop is going to be a goner. Yeah, so bishop f8. Does the queen want to go to h4 immediately? Don't know. I'm trying to think of rook f5 ideas, like sacking the rook. But the problem is, like, he doesn't have to take it. Why is my rook on f5? It doesn't do anything. So I think that's just a fancy move. I think it makes more sense just to lift up like this. And then I probably have sacrifices on h7. So h5 might be forced in some of these lines. There's going to be lots of lines, though, where I can sack the rook and play queen h4 with check and knight to g5 and just mate on h7 because the king's escape is cut off on f8 by the bishop. And as long as d3 is defended and pawn to c4 isn't a big deal, then I should be good. If b5, I can just go a5. I guess c4 then, maybe. Even so, queen h4 will keep an eye on the knight. And if my opponent wants to play in the center, it's going to take him a fair few moves to make anything happen. And I'll happily just attack him on the king side in the meantime. I mean, if I get queen h4 and rook h3, the game is almost over. So, yeah. And you can just see how constrictive this pawn on f6 is, which, again, can't really be gotten rid of because it's so well protected. And that's the big idea of my position. I mean, you could even make the argument for g4, g5, stopping any h5 ideas, but I think it's completely unnecessary. These three pieces should probably be able to just mate the black king. And you can see my opponent is taking an awfully long time because this is a very, very, well, maybe impossible position to defend. And this is why I like this Vienna setup against the modern defense, because the idea of f4, f5 is so powerful. So my opponent goes c4. Yeah, so if I take, he takes. I don't really see a reason to take. I mean, queen h4, take. The knight is defended. I don't really know why I'd bother engaging, so I'm just going to play on the king side. Bishop c5, obvious. Well, I think I probably just take the bishop because, well, I don't have to, actually. I could just leave it on pre and play king h1, and then I always have the option to take the bishop, so that should be pretty winning as well. Okay, so my opponent takes on d3. Let's think a second. So, of course, we can take back. The knight is defended, so that's not really an issue. We can take back with either rook, to be fair. We can take back with this rook. And then we have options to sacrifice rooks now, because we'd be able to bring all of them into the game. I don't think our king is in any danger. I mean, I guess he could maybe try and come to a2. So if we're going to take, we should probably take with this rook. So this rook on d1 can act as a defensive piece. Queen b3 hits the rook, but I don't think that's a big deal. Maybe just rook to d7 is interesting. We could ignore it, though. It might be better just to ignore it. So let's say rook h3, threatening checkmate, forcing the move h5. g4 can't be played because we hang the knight, so let's keep that in mind. Rook here, here. Take. Queen moves. I'm going to say e6 to try and stop g4. If she goes anywhere else, we're playing g4. Like, if she goes to b3, we'll play g4 and rip the position open. I think that makes sense. Knight g5, h5. g4 doesn't hang the rook. A knight defends the rook. g4. Are we being overzealous? Bishop c5 could be a problem. Maybe. I don't want to go over the top here. We could go here and after here go here, looking for sacrifices. Well, no, actually, we're threatening to take. And then sacrifices probably work. My opponent's defending well, I have to say. If knight g5, h5... not sure. What about here, here? I don't want to go h3, really. No, I'm going to go here and try and induce the move h5. I mean, he could go h6, I suppose, but that just looks like a target. Theoretically, I have knight g5 and if take mate, but I'm not actually posing a threat. He doesn't have to respond. So I think I'm just going to take. Queen c4? Trying to pin the knight to the queen, maybe? Good defensive resource. I think this makes sense. Queen c4. I mean, I don't really care about the a4 pawn, I don't think. How do I continue? Rook d7, maybe? Do I have a threat? I mean, the queen defends f7. I don't know. Maybe I want to play h4, h5? Maybe? Okay, if queen here, maybe also rook g3 is interesting. Okay, queen c6. That I wasn't so concerned about. That feels wrong. Because it hits the knight, but the knight's defended. It hits the pawn, but the pawn's defended. Takes the eyes off of f7 as well, but I guess that's not the biggest deal. If I move the rook, I guess he has rook d8. So I assume that's the idea. Hits a4, I guess. Do I care about a4? Maybe knight g3? Looking to bring the knight in? Here, here, here. I don't see how I continue in those lines. Maybe g4, g5 is the way to go, but that hangs the knight for now. I mean, b3 might be a move just to defend my position. Keep things tight for now. Okay, let's play it. I'm going to see what he does. I mean, my knight is perfectly safe. My queen can keep an eye on the knight. That's not a problem. My rooks are stopping rook d8, which would be the main source of counterplay. He could try and attack me on the queen side, maybe. I guess I have h3, king h2. I can step out of danger. I still have the g3 square for my rook. This is a good defensive setup for black, I will say. But I feel like there has to be a way through. Just got to figure it out. Just got to figure it out. The opening, though, has definitely been a success. Opening was a big success. Now it's trying to convert. How do we want to win, though? Maybe I just want to take it slow and improve the position. Maybe that's the easiest thing to do. I mean, black can't really go moving these pawns too much because it'll be very weakening. He can't move this, he can't move this. His only real plan is to move these pawns. If b5, a5, b4. I mean, I could take it, but I also have c4. And then I have a passed pawn. I guess he doesn't want to give me a passed pawn. That won't be good for him. But if black does nothing, he's eventually going to get checkmated, I would assume. Ooh. Okay, I'm brainstorming some ideas. I am brainstorming. So something like rook d7 could be quite strong. Because if I can go rook d7 and rook 1 to d3, knight g5 might actually carry a threat. Because if takes... Oh no, my queen's hit, so I don't have time for rook h3. I was thinking maybe I am actually threatening f7 there. Okay. Well, b5 played. So if I take open up his rook, which can't be correct. So I think I'm just going to push to a5. Again, he has no rook d8. I'm trying to keep everything shut. c3 is very well defended by the knight and the rook. Okay, queen e6. Sure. Hitting b3. I guess b4. And if queen c4, we continue. I have no good way to defend, so I'm going to go b4. a6 could be a weakness. Could be. I am aware c3 and c4 are weak squares now. But I mean, c3 is always defended by the knight, and the knight is on a light square, and it can't really be kicked away. That's a big point of my position, is the strength of the knight. So I'm trying to dominate the bishop, basically. And by putting these pawns on dark squares, I'm stopping it from coming into the game this way, although it's clearly a defensive piece. How can black play this? Rook c8, that's not really concerning. I mean, I could just move the rook. He can't take anyway. There is an argument to be made for rook d6. Because if take, queen e8 here does defend, but I don't know if it's enough. But there is queen a2 ideas. h3 might be an easy move just to give my king some breathing room. I think that makes sense to me. Although he is maybe trying to go rook c4, so I need to be aware of that. Rook c4 is annoying. I do get access to the back rank if he does that, though. If h3, rook c4. I don't like that. I mean, I don't want to play a move like knight d2. That looks bad. Maybe knight d6? Bishop d6, rook d6. Queen e8. That's possible. So if knight d6, rook c6. I guess I don't have a move from there, though. That's kind of it. So that doesn't make sense. I could rotate the queen to e3. That's an option. Or to f3. Knight c5 ideas are possible, but I don't think they're good. My opponent's making this very difficult. Rook d7, rook c4. Looks wrong. I'm struggling a bit here. I'm going to go queen g3. I think I want to put the queen on e3 to defend the knight, unpin, keep an eye on h6. Maybe we can go after the e5 pawn. Maybe I have knight c5 ideas. I don't know. Maybe rook d5, knight c5 is a maneuver. Maybe h4, h5 is possible. Although if h4, he can play h5, so not so sure. We're both low on time, though. I feel like if I play normal moves, there should be a breakthrough at some point. I assume he's going to try double the rooks on the c-file. But he could be giving away the d8 square, which could be deadly. I think I kind of do like my plan. Because if he tries something like this, like rook here, then rook here, and if something like take and take, then queen h6 is a big problem, because the bishop is pinned to the king. He could try... Oh, obviously the rook hangs in the line currently, but he could try something like that. Okay, I could go here. Take. Can't take on h6 because bishop back to f8. If take, take, that's no good. So no, that doesn't work. I think just rook d8. It has to be rook d8. Trying to exploit the bishop. If king h7... Stepping out of the pin. Knight g5 could be an option in the future, but not yet. I mean, I could always just take the rook, which looks reasonable, because I still have a lot of pressure. Rook d7, queen a7 is an option, maybe. My opponent's defending very well. King h7 found. Yeah, good move. I want to go queen h3 and knight here, but it doesn't work, obviously, because the queen can take. Rook d7? Maybe I can try something like this. That looks interesting. Makes sense. Guess I take then. I'm not sure what else. Here. Here, here, here. Here. No, let's attack the bishop. The bishop doesn't have squares. If rook c8, queen d3? Maybe? Or, I don't know. Here. Or there, that's a good move. Wait, is it? No. That doesn't work. That's just a free bishop. So rook d1 is obviously the idea. I don't know if you just missed that. But rook d1, king f2, queen f5, queen f3. I don't see a follow-up. If queen a2, I can escape to g3. So if here, here, here... Okay, well, he's setting up checkmate threats. But I have mate now. Very nice mate with rook h8 check. This is why you learn your tactics. This is why you learn your tactics. Then queen h6. And we mate on g7. GG. My opponent defended incredibly well that game. Like, that was really, really impressive. But we come away with the win in a very nice fashion. And yeah, I would love to see what the computer thinks about this. So let's jump into it. Okay, so 87% accuracy for us, 77.1 for my opponent. The opening went pretty well. So as I said, the engine hates like this bishop c4, for example. It wants pawn to d4, but this is just how I like to play the position. So c5, effectively transposing into a Sicilian. h4 is definitely a move in these lines. If h6, you can probably just go h5, g5, and play for f4. And this is quite interesting, to be fair. I think I just don't like if black plays h5 in response. Here, the engine wants like queen f3, and after e6, wants d4, and I mean, it's very interesting. Like knight b5, looking at d6, d5, ed5, ed5. Okay, this is very, very interesting. If take, then bishop takes, and we have lots of threats, then material is equal. If queen e7, we have to find bishop e2, apparently. Apparently, knight e2 is no good. So it's a bit complicated. But, okay, d3, d6, f4, knight f6, knight f3. So we're trying to stop d5. But after castles, castles, and e6, we can't really stop d5 from happening. And I don't really want to play a move like, let's say king h1 in this position. Because after d5, I can't play e5 because my opponent takes. So if here, dc4, ef6, queen f6, dc4, and technically it's equal material, but my opponent has a bishop pair, which is incredibly powerful, and my bishop sucks. And my knights, I mean, I can put a knight on e5, but other than that, they're not very impressive. So bishop e3 means that if d5 is played, then e5, and you can see we're almost winning. Like, here, engine likes g4 here, but even again, going for this knight e2 idea is very strong, c3, d4. So knight c6 from my opponent, pawn a4, because I don't want him to chase my bishop down. b6, knight e2. Here the engine slightly prefers queen e1, trying to swing the queen over, but I like knight e2. Going for c3, knight g3, and the quick f5. And you can also see the pawn a4 stops this pawn from coming to b5, which is also nice. So ef5, ef5. If this is taken, which of course it wasn't, then knight h4 basically ends the game, because I will be getting a knight into f5. So let's say knight e7, knight f5, knight f5, knight f5. I mean, this is a big problem. And if this, then knight h6, king g7, and I mean, amongst other things, this is probably a move, like sacking the rook on f6. It's probably not the best move, but it's definitely playable. Like, the king is completely stranded. The bishop's out of the game completely. So my opponent goes knight e5. Taking is the best move. Bishop g5 is the best move. I was thinking maybe taking on g6 was better. But no, I am correct, because if I go for this now, the knight just moves, and I have no pawn f6. That was the big idea. So bishop g5 is the best move. Bishop d5, take is best. If knight takes, then I was just going to play f6, kicking the bishop back, and this has to be good. So he takes with a queen. Bishop f6 is good. Bishop f6. Knight e4 is good, kicking the bishop. f6 is good, but queen g4 is slightly better, apparently. I think I was slightly concerned about f6, but here I can just take. So f6 isn't a concern. There's no f5, of course. So, yeah, I guess if queen takes on d3, here f6, bishop... Oh, bishop d6, I win the bishop. So if bishop d8, rook a to e1, apparently. And it doesn't matter that we're down a pawn because the black position is just horrific. But we go f6. Bishop d6, queen e1. Engine slightly prefers queen e2. Why? Rook fd8. h4. Okay, so I guess we're trying to go here and take. If h5, g4. Oh, wow, it just wants to blast through and get the queen on this diagonal. That makes sense. But queen e1, rook fe8. Rook d1 is a mistake. Really? It just wants h4. Really wants h4. If bishop f8 and h5, of course taking is bad. If, let's say, rook a7, we want to take. If he takes like this, I guess we just, yeah, win. And if this pawn takes, queen h4... If this, Knight g5. Threatening f7. Yeah, makes sense. Rook d1. Bishop f8. Rook f3. The engine just really wants me to go h4, h5. I just didn't consider it. Queen h4 is a mistake, really. Rook a8 is strong. Why? Let's say I come here. h6. Let's say I go to g3. What's the point? cd3, rook d3. Whoa. Okay. Didn't even consider that. cd3 though. Engine prefers taking first. And after the queen moves to c4, it wants rook d7. I think for some reason I was concerned about queen a4. Here we have to find b3, forcing the queen off of the 4th rank so I can play knight g5. Oh, yeah, that was my idea previously. And after h5, I mean knight f7, and this is going to be devastating. So rook h3, h6, rook d3, and now knight g5 can't be played, so I didn't consider that properly. Queen c6, b3 is the best move. b5, a5 is best. Here, rook to d5 is good. I should have considered that, just locking this away, going after e5, of course. So b4 is a bit inaccurate. Rook c8, queen g3, rook c4, queen e3. Not necessarily the best, but we are maintaining our advantage. I thought rook d8 was strong because king h7, we're actually winning after queen b6. I considered this, but not in this position. I only considered it. I only thought of take, queen b6, take. But then after rook b8, okay, apparently we have knight c5, which I didn't realize. This would be winning, but black doesn't have to trade. The best move would be queen b3, and then the game goes on. So rook 8 d7 is slightly wrong. Queen b6 is winning because after rook d8, there's no queen b3. If rook e4, queen e6, f e6, rook f8, and apparently this is winning. I'm not 100% convinced. Why? Rook a8, take, f7. Oh, okay. The rook can't defend properly. Okay, and if the rook comes back here, then I win a6, and then, yeah, that's game over. So something like here, here. Well, you can't take, actually. I'm just up way too much. So, okay, rook 8 d7 is not the best, but I'm still maintaining the advantage. That's the point. Rook c7, take, rook d8. Here, black has to find the move rook c8, which I was expecting, and then I can just retreat my rook. Taking, I'm not sure makes sense. I mean, it's interesting, like take, and then, I don't know, queen f3 is apparently the only move. I'm not sure I can explain why. But also queen d3 is maybe a possibility, like take and take. The engine thinks there's a draw, only if black finds king g8, which is relatively obvious, but game goes on. My opponent, of course, blunders. And I was expecting rook d1, king f2, queen f5, queen f3, and I couldn't see a way to continue for black. If he tries queen a2, king g3, and I again can't see continuation. Which is why, after queen a2, trying to set up checkmate, I also have knight g5, which is a nice mate. I also have queen h6, which is arguably a cooler mate. But to me, the obvious move was rook h8. That was just the first one I saw. And then after the king moves, we have mate on g7, but my opponent resigns. So, very interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you want to see that over-the-board game I was referencing, where I played the Vienna setup against the modern, so we got this position, and from here my opponent took about 20 minutes on move 3. Crazy. Check out the video up here. And if you want to see the previous episodes of the Climb 2 and beyond 2200 Rapid, check out the playlist down there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.